Hey, you're listening to Toku Takeout, a new weekly podcast by your hosts Tam, that's me, and
Cole, this is me. Each week we'll be talking about various tokusatsu news, I'm sure, something one of us has stumbled across, and then what we've been watching along the way, and yeah.
Okay, so 2020, we're all staying home for one reason or another.
Safety first.
Yes, absolutely. But it's also giving us an opportunity to kind of catch up with shows and media. And since we're not really going out to the movies, things can get kind of weird. So we're seeing kind of a popularity rise in introducing tokusatsu to the West. Shout Factory has started releasing the original, I think, was it 1971 Kamen Rider on streaming. And as of last week, they just started showing Kamen Rider Kuga, which was the series in 2000. You've got the Ultraman doing a real big push in the West, working with Netflix for exclusive animated series for the first time. It just seems like this is the time. This is the new explosion of Japanese superheroes into the West, and we're here for the ride.
Totally. I'm buckled up, full throttle.
Locked and loaded.
Locked and loaded. You may be wondering, what are we doing? I'm so glad that you asked yourself that while you've been sitting here listening to this podcast. We're going to be talking about all sorts of things, but we're also going to be starting off watching Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger. It's the 35th season of Super Sentai. It's an anniversary season. I have a lot of questions already out of the gate, but it should be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, the best part of doing an anniversary season and doing a watch along with it is that it doesn't really matter if you know any of the previous seasons or any of the post seasons. It's still a standalone, but it'll still introduce you to seasons that came before and different cameos and different power usage. And right now, Gokaiger's it's still one of the best seasons, in my opinion. It's a lot of fun and doesn't take itself too seriously.
Totally.
But, I mean, look, when I first watched Power Rangers as a kid, I guess I was pretty close to a teenager. It reminded me of like old kung fu movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something, newer seasons use more CG because they're trying to keep up, but in the end of the day, it's still a person in spandex kicking someone in rubber,
Yeah.
in a rubber monster
Totally.
suit. And there's just something that you don't get from the CG.
Yeah, but I think the use in tokusatsu with the CG, like, I think it only allows them to explore other spaces. Like, I don't think they're trying to be like, oh, we're in a real space station. They're like, no, like, look, it kind of looks like a space station, right? Dope. You believe? Here we are. We're on a space station. Versus
Right.
like really pushing for believability. It's just setting the stage, which I really appreciate. There's like a earnestness to the production where it's just like, cool, like, you know what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like you're kind of in on it a lot of the times. And honestly, sometimes when shows and movies go for that grounded realism, because they want everything to be kind of sympathetic. Honestly, sometimes if it's not done right, it'll take me out of it. But you talk about something like tokusatsu where it's just fun,
Right.
where you can use more of your imagination. I actually get more drawn in. Like it's
Definitely.
I feel more involved, I guess, because I don't know. Maybe I'm making up the difference. But yeah, it's just besides the big two, of Super Sentai, which we've brought over as Power Rangers, and Kamen Rider, which we've brought over as both Kamen Rider and Masked Rider.
Hmm.
You can go to, the OG with Ultraman, but there are also little, like, individual Toku shows popping up and Toku movies that are just standalones. And
Hmm.
they're kind of special of their own. And when I've listened to other podcasts that deal with Super Sentai or Kamen Rider, a lot of the times they're just based on that one kind of franchise. And I don't know, I kind of wish there was a show that would talk about these other things. Like, no one talks about Cutie Honey. Cutie Honey was a manga, it was an anime, it's been a movie and a live action series, and it goes beyond Magical Girl. But she was also one of the first Magical Girls, and Magical Girl is where Sentai comes from. So, if no one talks about it though. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if, as we do this podcast, I don't want to just talk about Power Rangers and Super Sentai and Kamen Rider. I will get to the other stuff too. I hope, comics and video games that are based on the properties.
Totally. Like when I think tokusatsu, like of course I think Super Sentai, but I also think of like Earth Defense Force on the PlayStation, and I think of I guess Ronin Warriors or Samurai Troopers or Sailor Moon. Like if you got a group of people, young teens in various colors, like come aboard. Come one,
right.
come all. Like my arms are wide open for you.
I mean, so earlier before we were recording, you were talking about He-Man a little bit.
Yeah.
And, with DreamWorks She-Ra doing numbers
Yes.
and everything else.
Oh my god, I love it.
When I was that age, the show I tuned in every Saturday was Voltron.
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
Oh,
stop
yeah.
me if you've heard this one.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
5 teenagers kind of in a semi-paramilitary, have control of giant robotic lions that, they're fighting against an invading force of monsters / aliens. And they've got specific color-coded uniforms. And
It's very subtle.
yeah, it's subtle. It's just when the individual lions can't handle the big monster of the week, they have to bring them together and form a giant humanoid robot with
so
a
good.
sword.
So good.
And it's like, that's Power Rangers, that's Super Sentai.
Yeah.
The best part though is, for me, the seasons of Super Sentai when they're still using models.
Oh
And
my god, it's the best.
Yeah, you've
my favorite.
got some like Japanese man in a suit made of like fiberglass and cardboard stomping around a train set.
Yes.
And they have the sparks going off because they've got little fireworks shooters.
100%.
And it's just the best thing.
I love it so
it
much.
Takes me right back to
So
watching
much.
Voltron. So it's what we need right now, in my opinion, is a little bit of fun, a little bit of entertainment, something that's not going to make us doubt the world and doubt ourselves.
Totally.
And,
And
we got to turn the news off every now and again.
Totally. And I was talking to someone about kind of like what we want to do here. And they were like, don't you think that's a little bit childish? And I was just like, absolutely not. I was like, I think it's like childlike whimsy and wonder and enthusiasm. But like, I'm not trying to hide behind anything here. I was just like, I am nostalgic for these stories because throughout the seasons and franchises, like a lot of those narratives are about, fighting for like love, friendship, your individuality. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's so simple, and there's just monsters and explosions.
Right.
Like I don't think that there's anything childish about it. I
I mean,
think it's I think it's human nature to build stories and be reflective and be fantastical. So like, hell yeah, sign me up. Let's go.
look, people have to learn that something that's family friendly, or even something that's aimed at children
Hmm.
that doesn't talk down to kids is fully enjoyable by adults. There's
Totally.
nothing wrong. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing wrong with family friendly media. And that's all this is. It's
Hmm.
superheroes. I grew up reading Batman and Robin and,
Right.
Spider-Man and everything else, but it's just more of it. It's just,
Totally.
I don't know if they don't have, like, the gallons of fake blood and they don't have dramatic camera angles making me wonder, why did my hero break the only rule he would never break?
Right.
you know? There's nothing wrong with having some fun with it, and I love it.
Hmm.
Kind of as we do this podcast, I really hope we'll get around to it. I mean, you think about other Toku shows, because Toku just means special effects.
Right.
So Star Wars is tokusatsu.
Mm.
Doctor Who is tokusatsu.
Sure.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer is tokusatsu.
Well, hold up now. Okay.
So,
I'm here for it.
yeah, so talk about Western properties that are still tokusatsu. There's nothing that says it has to be made in Japan, that they have to be Japanese speaking. I mean, there are plenty of toku shows produced out of Taiwan and China that a
Hmm.
lot of people don't watch or talk about. But
One of my favorite movies is Super Inframan, and that's done by the Shaw brothers, and they're famous for like kung fu movies.
oh, awesome.
So he's like a kung fu hero. That's a little
Yeah.
bit. That's a little bit about me. But
Okay,
like
so so I can't remember what that director's called. Miki something. Famous Japanese director, but he's done two movies called Zebra Man.
Ooh.
And they are based on basically a love for growing up with the Japanese superheroes. It gets a little dark, it gets a little goofy, but again, all tokusatsu means is a special effects heavy thing.
Hmm.
And that can branch off into all these other things like team ups and superheroes, but even a superhero doesn't necessarily have to have a superhero costume. And that's why I was going back to, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a tokusatsu show. It's a Monster of the Week show with CG
Right.
effects. But it's not like it's not like she's checking her watch and then, there's this big costume change.
Yeah, henshin. Yeah.
Right? She's not standing there like, all right, it's time to vampire up.
But what if she did? Just what if?
I mean,
What
I
would
would
that
still
look
watch it. I would
Yeah.
still watch it. I'm sure there's an anime out there that's done that exact thing.
Oh, 100%.
I come at this podcast with a love of tokusatsu that really started, I would say, in my 20s. As a kid, I watched Voltron, like I mentioned before. I've watched Power Rangers. I watched VR Troopers. I watched the Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, I think it was called.
Of course you did, yes.
I watched all sorts of things like that, and then kind of dropped off, because it still had that thought of, okay, I've grown out of it now. These are things for kids. They're not cool anymore. Let's turn our time to, gory movies and blood and murder. But in my first year of marriage in 2003, Power Rangers had an anniversary season where they brought back the dinosaurs and they brought back Tommy. And I was sucked in.
That doesn't sound right.
I had to tune in. And I was like, honey, look, it's just like when I was a kid. And I admit it, after that season, which was great, I kind of fell off again because it just wasn't as much fun for me. It talked down to the audience a lot of the times. But it connected me to a community where I said, hey, is there more stuff like this? And someone said,
welcome.
Have you ever watched the Japanese original? What? No, is there a place I can do that? Because I don't know any Japanese. And that got me started with Deca Ranger, which is the Super Sentai that we got or adapted as Power Rangers SPD. So they're space cops. It's great. Yes. And then after that was done, it was like moving on to Kamen Rider, because at that time it was early days in fan subbing for this stuff. Wasn't a whole lot to choose from that was already subtitled. Next thing was Kamen Rider, and I watched Kamen Rider Fies, which, oddly enough, was a grim dark kind of.
Sure.
If I'm going to compare it to anything, it's going to be Ava. Evangelion. It gets really heavy, really dark. But that, oddly enough, going from a show like Deca Ranger and Magi Ranger to Kamen Rider Fies showed the kind of breadth of what these shows could encompass. It wasn't like Power Rangers when I was a kid, where every season had kind of that specific tone. And that's what got me into Kamen Rider. And I tell you what, since 2003, I have been watching tokusatsu of some kind since. I have every season of Super Sentai. I have every season of Kamen Rider translated in English. And I've got other stuff, like I mentioned Cutie Honey before, and I've just become such a fan. And now that some of it's, more of it's coming west, I want to hop on and introduce people to these things and get more people watching and just share the love.
For sure.
And what about you, Cole? What's your background here?
What about me?
Yeah, how are you coming into this one?
I'm coming in hot. So I grew up watching Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle when I was little. I got into karate because I knew at a young age I would not be a turtle. But
I was Donatello.
I love Donatello. The staff is usually the first weapon you use or you learn. So I was just like, oh, this is relatable here. I love
Everyone
Donatello.
had a broom handle.
Yeah. Totally. But at a young age, I realized I would never be a turtle. So I was like, well, I could be someone in a suit, right? So I continued martial arts. I wanted to be one of these heroes. I wanted to hang out at the smoothie shop and then, save the neighborhood by night. It's fine. Yeah. Mighty Morphin was huge for me. And I fell off when Zeo came out. I think just because it was like new people. I was like, what? How'd you... But no, where are the others? And then Pokemon probably also just obliterated my brain. Let's be real. But
right.
I grew up with that. I grew up with kung fu movies from like the 70s and 80s. Voltron you mentioned. But it wasn't until like 2017, I believe, my best friend got me Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger for Christmas. It's kind of like I thought you might think this is dope, but like shot out of a cannon type gift. And I was just like, oh my God. So we immediately just like binge watched it. And I was just like, this is what I always wanted Power Rangers to be.
Right.
I was like, it's not pandering. Somehow, and Zyurangers is the first season to have like mystical powers versus just being like technology based, and I was just like, oh, what is happening? They're all princes and princesses and knights from the 60 billion years in the past. Like I became a child. I was like, this is amazing. So that took me to at that same time I was like, okay, Kaku Ranger, Dai Ranger. I started watching Kamen Rider 4s, and X8 I believe had just aired. So like my Kamen Rider knowledge is super few and far between. I've just kind of piecemealed my experience there because I have been just operating off of Shout Factory Super Sentai packages. With Ultraman, I started with Ultraman 80.
Okay.
I don't know why that's where I started. But Ultraman Gaia was the first season I watched beginning to end. It made me so angry. Don't come after me. But I have issues with that season. But yeah, like I just went 0 to 200 with my tokusatsu consumption a few years ago. But yeah, I just am all over the place. And just have like a wild amount of enthusiasm for it all and want to learn all the things. And I think that's what gets me so excited about Gokaiger, because we're 3 episodes in and I'm already seeing some of these characters that I've seen in the Super Sentai context.
I mean, the first episode we were watching, and you were just like, oh, I think I like Doc. And you're like, oh, I think I like the pink one, the princessy.
Yeah, which is also like not a thing I generally...
Because she backs it up by kicking some ass.
Yeah.
She's just very proper about it.
Totally. Like, yeah, I think there's like an unwritten rule in tokusatsu that, like, whether it's the individual or if it's a group, like, the sass level has to be, like, ratcheted up. And I think that's what I really love. Like, without even, like, I don't know if that's, like, an unspoken rule in tokusatsu, but everyone's sassy. Villains are sassy. You have characters named like Lipstick Songstress. Defaultly, you are sassy with a name like that.
Right.
And then you have the inner group dynamic versus the group and the villain, and just sass abound. And I love it, and I'm here for it.
Yes, absolutely. The attitude is great. And I mean, I guess the real difference is, like we were talking about, whether it talks down to the audience or not. I don't get that feeling from tokusatsu. Maybe it's because it's fan translated. I don't know. You know, maybe it's because I'm not used to that style of acting, or it's not my native language. I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is when I watch Power Rangers, it's very obvious that they're aiming for little kids who want to play with their toys. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Disney has been making movies for years aimed at kids and not talking down to them. When I was younger, I was in love with Batman the Animated Series. I was like 11, 12 years old. It never talked down to me. And now if you look, however many years later it's been almost 30 years later, there's still a love and a fandom and even like a revival of Batman the Animated Series getting this kind of sequelized content because people remember it and still love it because it didn't talk down to them.
Yeah, there was like that show had just like a refinement in animation that you don't see in other shows. Like, people literally talk about just the title card of that show.
Yes, that's true.
Like,
yeah, there were some beautiful title cards on that show.
And I always think of the episode where like Bruce almost kills someone, and then he's just like, oh, like that was such a moment where it's not like that show had the hero be vulnerable in a way that you don't see often in American TV shows, especially like if you think of like G.I. Joe or the Thundercats or a bunch of shows just made for kids to like do whatever. Like vulnerability isn't often a thing.
Right. Yes, exactly. If it's a show that's meant for kids over here, they don't get that deep with it.
Mm-mm.
And I think it also comes down to kind of an attitude on the mental health of it. Is
For sure.
Just, it's superheroes, it's bombastic, that's great. But when I watch tokusatsu, specifically Super Sentai or Kamen Rider, they deal with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it may only be, don't get me wrong, it may be like Full House.
Yeah.
Over and done in 30 minutes, and let's go get ice cream, and there's a freeze frame, and everybody's laughing. That's fine.
Yeah. But they had the
still
moment.
Acknowledged it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I don't know. I have found in tokusatsu a lot of the things I had been missing from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And from American TV from when I was younger, that has just been kind of sanitized out. And that doesn't mean watch stuff that's, dropping F-bombs because it's a Netflix streaming TV.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I need the gritty, that I need to see the bone pop out of the leg when someone gets punched or some nonsense.
Totally.
I don't know. That almost gives me like a PTSD at that point.
Yeah.
So give me colorful teenagers in spandex. Give me big robots. Give me monsters with mouths that don't move.
Totally.
And let's have a good time.
I love having a good time. And I want some model train sets. I want some, I'm going to say explosions, which I said I wasn't going to say anymore today. But you know what? Sometimes
if there's not like a shower of sparks and like 200 gallons of gasoline in the air by the time the episode's over, did we really accomplish anything?
Right. I don't know about you, but in Animal Crossing New Horizons, I'm trying to collect all the suits to make a Sentai Command Center on my island.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. This is me now. But hopefully this sounds exciting for you, and you'll join us along the way. Once again, I've been Cole.
And I've been Tam.
If you'd like to stay up on all the news and what we're up to, you can go to tokutakeout.com or follow us over on Twitter at Toku Takeout. And if you'd like to follow us individually on Twitter, you can follow Tam at TamazonX, and I'm at OKRetroZone. And this has been Toku Takeout, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.